Okay, and we are now live.
This is Senate Appropriations. We're working on the FY 2022 budget, and we are going to take testimony from Department of Corrections for their section of the budget. And we have with us Commissioner Baker, and we have Matt D'Agostino from Business Office. Do you have anyone else with you, Commissioner?
That's who we have. That's it.
Okay, well, I think 2 is fine for Friday afternoon. And do you have a document that you want to share? As you might know, Senate approaches the budget perhaps with a little less granularity. Maybe that's a good way of describing it.
I remember well, Senator.
So what we'd like is really the budget highlights, but also sort of have an opportunity to hear from you in terms of the sort of what's going well. What you see are the pressure points and the challenges. Obviously, running institutions and COVID has added even more pressure on a system that is always under pressure. So anything that you think would be of interest, this is a great opportunity to sort of brief us and bring us up to date on the world of corrections in Vermont. So we'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you, Senator. For the record, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jim Baker. I'm the Interim Commissioner of Corrections. And I have with me Matt D'Agostino, who is our Financial Director. And Senator, I thought if it's good with the committee, just based on what you just said, I think we can go right to Matt and have him start walking you through. He does have documents with us that I think Chrissy can put up for us. I'll have Matt, if it's okay, Matt can start walking through the financial ups and downs. He'll talk about the money, I'll talk about the policy, and then we can circle back, because I suspect that some of what we talk about in the budget will bring questions and comments from the committee, and we can go back and talk about what you were mentioning before.
Great. Okay.
Pressures we're under. If that works for you, we'll follow that process.
Okay. And Matt, when you do the ups and downs, if you're doing just, there's an awful lot of routine, internal service funds and for fee for space and all of that. So you don't need to, you don't need to go through line by line, I guess is what I'm telling you, but really to pick out what you think are really significant changes in the world of your different different divisions. We do know, and it's will be a topic of discussion, and that is the governor's proposal to move the costs of the Community High School of Vermont to the Education Fund once again. But maybe there's some other initiatives as well that you will touch on for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that's a pretty good segue. I will skip over most of the routine salary and fringe and other adjustments to the ups and downs that we go through each year, just with varying amounts. I think, though, the first item, and Chrissy, if you wouldn't mind going, it's actually page 7 of the budget presentation where the ups and downs begins. Not sure if everybody else has it on their screen, but could follow along on this. And Madam Chair, as you mentioned, the first 2 appropriations, the administrative and parole board, the only adjustments that we have are upward pressures for cost of living adjustments, salary and fringe. So moving to the next appropriation, the bottom of the page, which is corrections education, there is the proposal there to move the funding from general funds to education fund.
And I'm sure that's been warmly and strongly embraced by our colleagues in the House.
There wasn't a lot of discussion about this. We spoke about it with the House, but I haven't been privy to other conversations other than our House Appropriations testimony where it did come up. This, of course, was it was in education fund up until FY19, where the decision was made to move it to general fund. And the proposal is to move the funding, like I said, as the primary source for the high school. It's funded by currently general funds, as well as some grants that we receive through the Agency of Education. The
Mhm.
grants wouldn't be impacted by this, but the general fund source or versus education fund is what's been requested here.
Okay.
Senator, I will, when we get through this, I'll talk a little bit about, we are talking internally about a new direction for the whole educational skill building piece,
Mhm.
moving away from a high school format. But I'll let Matt continue and then we can come
Yeah,
back.
I've heard that in terms of a much more sort of occupational specific and training and credentialing. So
Skill building based, but
yeah.
I'll let
Mhm.
Matt keep going and then we can circle back if that's okay with you.
Uh-huh. Okay. But that's 3.2. If we don't agree with it, then has to be filled. Committee, just to put that on your list. Not inconsequential in the scheme of things. I guess not much there, Matt.
No, I believe this is it for this page. And Chrissy, if you wouldn't mind advancing to page 8, we can look at the correctional services appropriation where the bulk of the budget changes exist in this appropriation. Again, some salary and fringe adjustments in the offender management system, annual increase. The third line there is the health services contract savings of $500,000. As you may know, the current contract with Vital Core began on July 1st of 2020. So we're currently in our first year of that contract. The contract now runs concurrent with fiscal year. So the second year of the contract will start on July 1st, as will FY22. There were some per inmate per month decreases in the new contract as compared to the old contract. As we get further into the contract, we do anticipate potentially some more savings. And so this proposal for the $500,000 reduction adjusts for those per inmate per month savings from the previous contract. There's also some delayed implementation of the proposed electronic health record system. There is one currently. We were looking to move to a new one that may be delayed. So there may be some savings associated with that in fiscal year 22 as well.
Okay.
Matt, just quickly, what is the percentage of increase overall?
To the health services contract
No, I'm sorry, in the whole ask.
Oh, I apologize. That's usually the first thing I go over. The total budget for FY22 proposed is a decrease of just under $420,000 as compared to FY21, so about a 0.25% decrease. However, general fund, there is an increase of a little over almost $1.1 million. It's about 0.75% increase to general fund in our budget.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But some of that's going to be distorted by the reduction of over 3 million general fund for the community high school at Vermont. So there's, the comparisons are a bit from this year to next to what's being proposed. It's being influenced by that. Okay. I just love this sheet here. You do know that I'm the mother of the ups and downs sheet, so it's my legacy. Some people have rooms and buildings named for them and important things, and I just want you to know, I think they should just put this, something to honor me with these sheets. Don't you think that would be a good idea? It's pitiful. It's pitiful that this would be my legacy.
Senator, I'll pipe up and I'll say I think it's wonderful. They should name the sheets after you.
Well, Commissioner, my one thing is when I left state government after 35 years, I do have a bench made by Correctional Industries with a little plaque on it, and it didn't flood away. So I guess that lives on.
Well, I'm glad to hear that for sure.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
The ups and downs of Senator Kitchell.
Yeah, I think there's probably been more downs than ups, but we'll keep going. It's pretty self-explanatory. One of the things, and this gets back into policy, and I was going to ask the commissioner, and that was with a health contract and what it has meant for the employees working now with a new company, and with COVID and having to quarantine and lost time from work, et cetera. But that's just something to, because I know you said that was an issue that you were working on. So I'd like an update on that when we get through the numbers.
We'll give you that, ma'am.
Okay, other questions about this? This is,
My only question, Senator Kitchell, if there was any way to make it a little bit bigger on the screen.
sure, you only have to ask.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So this is where we're seeing the justice reinvestment with housing and the intervention programming.
That's correct. There's the $300,000 for transitional housing as part of Justice Reinvestment 2, and $200,000 for the domestic violence intervention, which would be domestic violence accountability programs and work that the Vermont Network has continues to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Matt, where does Justice Reinvestment, as I always understood it, was repurposing money as we reduce beds? Is there a place here that shows that reduction that matches that $500,000?
Senator, no, not in this particular budget. We do have a little over $360,000 that's included in the FY22 base that was part of, going backwards now, FY21 reduction of beds going into the FY21 budget that were repurposed instead of bottom line savings. They became part of the base budget. So it doesn't show on the ups and downs itself, but there is $360,000 for that purpose.
Already in the base.
Yeah,
Correct.
just a question then. Does this $500,000 represent over and above savings achieved? I see the commissioner nodding.
Yeah, correct. In the sense that yes, there weren't actual reductions in other areas of the budget for this. This was part of the administration's recommendations or initiatives for justice reinvestment. And I believe the approach of this is that there will be savings as resulting from decreases in beds, but in this particular budget, we don't have. Part of the challenge here is, and we'll see, I guess, when we get to out-of-state beds, it's very difficult in any given year to predict what that population might be, what the overflow from in-state capacity is, but particularly during the pandemic, without the ability to, with the need for quarantine and isolation within the in-state facilities and effectively losing bed space or space capacity within the facilities as a result, we didn't have the ability to project savings in the 22 budget immediately as a result of that.
Understood.
Okay.
And just one more point, if I could. And I support these investments strongly. I just wanted to be clear in my own mind. So it's fair to say that justice reinvestment is in large part realized savings, but not entirely. In some ways, it's hope for savings in the future.
I think that's what I interpreted with the 300 and the 200, that these are that because of COVID, we didn't see the bed reduction to generate the savings for reinvestment, but the administration is saying this is their commitment. So they're putting an additional general fund to support this initiative over and above the 387 that's in the base.
Yeah, so Senator Kitchell and Senator Bruce, that's exactly what it was. And when we get into the out-of-state beds, we're at 181 folks in Mississippi right now. But I'll explain to you what happened this week and why it's so difficult for us to predict what's going to happen in Mississippi. But what happened is when we put the budget together, the base from last year was that 360-ish, and the administration made the commitment to help us with some potential programming we want to do coming out of reinvestment too, to try to impact the beds in Mississippi. But it's hard to predict that right now because of the virus. And I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. Does that help clarify that, sir?
It does. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and obviously this is something Senator Sears will be paying close attention. He had an appointment for his wife, so I don't believe he's on right now, but don't worry, you'll be hearing from him, Commissioner.
I fully expect I will, Senator.
Yeah, I bet. All right. So now we're down to correctional services.
Yes, we skipped over operating. This is pretty standard, the facility, energy, and other utility increases. The internal service fund adjustments for each year. Unless you want to go through any of those, that's pretty much it in terms of correctional services. Probably should mention it's a little bit higher up than what I'm seeing on the screen right now. There is a technical adjustment related to the CARES Act funding.
Yeah. We understand that. We also understand corrections helped with the deal with the situation where we were using CRF for indirect costs, and that wasn't permissible. So we had to exchange the corrections direct costs and use CRF for that and free up the general fund to deal with the indirect. So we know that it resulted in some movement there. My one question is internal service fund, DHR, that's the one sort of big one there. Can you explain that one? It's an internal service fund expense.
Matt, do you want me to take that?
Up to you, Commissioner, if you'd like to, certainly.
So that's our fee from DHR for the support that HR gives us internally with their staff. That jump this year is really reflective of the number of personnel investigations that they do for us. We account for a big part of their investigative team supporting our HR investigations.
Okay, thank you. And then workers' comp as well is up, and that's just actual experience.
Matt.
That's right. It's a combination of the actual realized claims that there have been from DOC staff. And there's also the independent actuarial analysis that's done to project what workers' comp costs will be across the state. A portion of the increase is that as well.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner, back to the DHR. So if I understood you right, you're saying there was in essence, a spike in investigations that resulted in that. Is that connected to the South Burlington situation?
I can't say like what the percentage of the spike was, Senator, but when we inquired about, hey, why did that go up? We were told that it was the number of cases they do to support us on the investigation. I would not say that it's driven by personnel investigations coming out of the Chittenden situation. It's across the board. Across the board, the investigations they do for us on employee conduct.
Okay.
So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Well,
because you look like maybe it's always hard on Zoom to figure out if I got the message.
It seemed like your answer could apply to a yes or a no, but
I think maybe some of it is in there, but it's not totally one facility.
Right.
Okay.
That's
Thank
my
you.
translation of what was said.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? No, we'll keep going then. Here we are. Out of state beds. Is this the one we're on next?
That's right. So there are no changes in the 22 proposed budget for out of state. So this $5,640,000 represents what approximately 200 total beds in terms of caseload for the year.
But as you're saying, some of that's so hard to predict what that's going to look like throughout the next coming fiscal year.
That's correct, Senator. We're at 181 right now. So when I first saw all of you last year, we were at 246. We're at 181 right now. And I can talk about it now, or we can wait. It's up to you. But I can.
Well, I know
explain to you-
Senator Sears has been concerned that we're going to see utilization go up because once the courts become operational again, there's just a large backlog of cases. So it adds to the uncertainty of what that's going to look like.
Plus, the other big uncertainty is COVID. And I'll give you, we have a bit of an outbreak at the Northwest facility. We have 14 inmates that are positive. And as a result of that, in order for us to be able to handle the quarantining there, we got to transfer 12 inmates down to Springfield. So we have to keep the flexibility right now of bed space open in state in order to shut the virus down when we encounter it. And that's just, it's one of many examples of why it's a catch-22 right now and how we're going to manage the out-of-state space. And we took a ballpark figure of 200 beds when we built the budget.
All right. Well, it sounds like with all the unknowns, it's and that being at 181, it's doesn't seem to be out of kilter one way or the other for right now. But Senator Sears would have a good sense of that as well. Other questions about the out-of-state beds? Okay.
Well, maybe I have one, Jane.
What? I'm sorry, Bobby.
A quick question, is it still cheaper to have our people out of state than having them home in our own system?
Senator, I'd like to say yes or no to that. Going back to Senator Booth, it's what I found out coming into corrections. I always heard from the outside that somebody would throw a figure out. It costs X amount of thousands of dollars per year to house somebody in Vermont. I have no idea where that came from, because the fact of the matter is, if you reduce a bed in the system in Vermont, you're not saving a whole lot of money. You may be saving $5 or $7 a day, because you still got to have a building staff and all of the support that goes to support that building. So for me to answer that question, it's kind of hard. What I've come to the conclusion is, and I could be 100% wrong, but it's cheaper to have people in state than it is out of state, because you've got the buildings anyway, you have the staff, you've got to have a medical contract. The money you're spending out of state is over and on top of that.
Yeah, unless you can shut down an entire wing or whatever, it's you are not achieving it.
Even that,
saving. But
right.
The other one is, this gets into the policy area, and that has to do with family connections and quality and so forth, which is other related considerations. But it has often been said, well, the one advantage of the out-of-state beds, depending on how the contract is written, is that if you only pay for the ones that you use, then every bed you take off gives you
correct.
savings.
That's
But
exactly
that
what it
is not true on the state side, because you could have one less inmate, but it means unless you can shut down an entire wing, you've got to keep that
Right.
infrastructure intact.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Senator.
are we on the recreation?
We are.
B340?
Very quickly, I should have said a couple moments ago when it was asked about the DHR costs. There hasn't necessarily been a spike in investigations. While DOC represents nearly 40% of the total statewide investigations, the large purpose for this, the increase in DOC's budget, is this was an expense that used to be internal to AHS. The agreement between AHS and DHR changed such that now it's part of the internal service fund billing. So DOC sees this directly.
Oh,
And
so
that-
it's always
that
been
changed.
there. It's just become much more transparent.
In terms of DOC's budget, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the first time that's been broken out that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
I should have just had Matt answer that, Senator, when you asked.
Uh-huh.
The go-to.
I'm sure that's what you meant to say.
Exactly right, Senator.
Yeah. All right. Well, recreation doesn't look too exciting, I'm sorry to say.
So, right, we just have the final page is the recreation budget and the Vermont Offender Work Program budget. Both of these, they each just have the cost of living adjustments for the staff associated with those appropriations.
Do you, all right, so the staff costs you break up and allocate to the program as opposed to just one large administrative budget for the entire department?
That's correct. Barring the out-of-state appropriation, there are employees associated with each of the other 6 appropriations for DOC.
Is probation and parole, did we go? Did we go by them already?
Sorry, parole board or probation and parole?
Probation and parole.
Yes,
You're-
that's included with correctional services. It's both field and facility are all bundled together into that larger appropriation.
Uh-huh. There's legislation. This is a policy question, I guess, for the commissioner. Is it VSEA is suggesting that probation officers should be armed? Does the department have a position on that?
Yeah, we do. And, you know, I think the position I have is the same position the department had before I got here. And I'm not supportive of arming probation and parole officers unless it's all or none, number one. Some states probation and parole officers are armed. It's all or none. And we have to really talk about the level of training that you're going to give and the understanding of deadly force. And that, and you all know the level of discussion that's going on at the State House right now around use of force by law enforcement. So I become very concerned when I hear we're going to add more firearms and there isn't the scrutiny or the background that goes into individuals carrying firearms. Now, what the union will say to you is, well, some folks carry firearms in corrections, and that's true. On our perimeter patrols at the bigger facilities, for example, Northwest and Southern, that perimeter patrol is armed. They patrol the outside of the facility, less about people coming out, more about contraband or something coming from the outside into the facility. We do authorize the carrying of firearms for employees on specific threats. And that requires an amount of training, but they don't carry those firearms as part of their regular course of duty. So I would have to have a very serious conversation to understand what the expectation would be, because it's a big policy decision when you start shifting from our role of rehabilitation and corrections into carrying firearms.
Mhm.
And the mindset is not a small shift.
Oh,
And
it's a very significant, if we're done, we can go back to looking at, so we can see people are we
Yeah.
done with the ups and downs?
We are.
Okay, no, you're absolutely right. It's a profound policy change and it
Mhm.
is a substantial redefinition of what the role, at a time when we're trying to become less reliant on that aggressive law enforcement approach. It seems like it's almost counter to the desire to keep things at a much lower key. And of course, years ago, probation officers really did a tremendous, they did a lot of casework. They helped with housing. They helped do income tax forms. They really were there, not just as enforcement, but to really provide support to people who sometimes that made a real critical difference, whether they succeeded or not. So it seems like something, if that policy proposal has tremendous implications, and it's not ones that the money committees need to take a whole lot of time on. But I was just wondering if the department had a position on it. Senator Bruce.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the commissioner for that testimony. I think that's just a bad idea and moving in the wrong direction. I was a little concerned the other day because it began to look as though there were plans to expand body cameras to include parole officers. And it seemed to me perhaps an interim step to making the argument that, well, they have body cameras, so therefore it wouldn't be an issue with arming them. So I tried to make it clear at that point that I don't believe there's a need for parole officers to be wearing body cameras or to be armed. That doesn't mean we wouldn't take it up in judiciary and House corrections and all the committees of jurisdiction, but it does seem to me to be looking for trouble to be arming that particular group of people.
I wasn't clear. Is the camera proposal, I think it was $1 million for procurement. Is it for which employees, Commissioner?
All right, so I'll get to that, Senator, just because I do want to just clarify one thing. There are situations that our probation and parole officers find themselves in that are very dangerous. There's no two ways around it. Some of the folks that we supervise in the field, they've got a history of violence, and they do find themselves in dangerous situations. So I understand that piece of it. All of you know my background. I mean, I'm going on my 49th year in the justice system. The chunk of that is in law enforcement. A big chunk of my time that I worked in DC was on use of force issues and shootings. I led a team that looked at shootings of unarmed individuals in the country. I understand that issue. I understand the danger. So the problem is that it's, number one, it's a big policy shift, just like you're all saying. And number two, when you make that policy shift, the people that are carrying firearms have to be scrutinized at a higher level than we scrutinize the individuals that we brought into our organization. Now, with that said, because I'm sure folks are listening to what I'm saying, besides all of you. With that said, I'm not saying that the people we hired shouldn't have been hired and they're not doing a good job. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're going to carry firearms, you have to go through what you go through at the police academy to be certified to do that. If not, you're putting people in a very bad situation to use force when it's not appropriate. So that's that piece on that, just in response to Senator Bruce. Senator Kitchell, to your point, the plan for the body cameras right now are for the correctional officers and security staff inside the facilities.
Well, that's what I thought. And then when somebody said, "Oh no," and it's like, well, then I must have assumed wrong.
Well, we had testimony.
Sorry, Senator. Right? I'm sorry, I cut you off, sir.
Oh, I was just going to say we had testimony from who was it that mentioned in passing parole officers and body cameras?
Somebody said it in a committee, and I said, I didn't think it was that. I thought it was correctional officers. So that's why I'm asking the question. But it was, I think when people were saying cameras in corrections, people assumed cameras for different employees. But
I think wasn't it Adam Gresham and Hardy's presentation?
Yes, I guess it was. So, but
So
we
the
said
commissioner
we
may
needed
have
to
said
clarify.
that, yeah. So the commissioner may have said that because in the recommendation for the governor to provide that funds to us in his key priorities, our focus right now is to get them in the facilities. I'm not saying we won't have the conversation once we see how far the funding takes us. First of all. Second of all, we're working with House Corrections Institution on a committee bill right now that's going to include the body camera piece, right? So that's going to get flushed out. But we focused on it originally because of the COs inside the facilities. And I have had, this was brought forward because of some of the unfortunate incidents that have occurred with staff. And we also get into very big time litigation in corrections around allegations made against staff. We're probably an agency, I've said this in front of a couple committees. I've been here a year. I have over 100 lawsuits I'm named. I mean, I spent 40 some years in the business, have been sued 30 times. And, so the litigation itself is part of what we were thinking about, raising the professional level, training purposes. So we could eventually get to the probation and parole officers, but we're going to be starting with the correctional staff inside the facilities.
Okay.
So I don't want
Thank
to
you.
say no, but I want to be clear on what the mindset inside corrections is right now.
Well, that's very helpful. And it's also good to have some clarity about the proposal and for which positions. Senator Sears, glad to see you back. We've gone through the money. Now we're just talking about policy and other areas that are not necessarily dollars and cents, but more in terms of the system at work. And other questions of the Commissioner, you said you wanted to talk about policy. Perhaps we haven't touched on some of the areas that you wanted to bring to our attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of touch on the past year, right? To kind of think about where we've been and where we are, and the work that's been done in the last year. It's been a tough year with COVID, and I forwarded to some of the key legislators that have oversight. We have another outbreak in the Northwest facility, and the strain on the staff right now is just, I cannot emphasize the amount of stress that the staff is under right now, and the mandatory overtime. What's killing us right now is contact tracing. So you can have 1 or 2 staff members positive, and it puts 10 or 15 people out of work quarantine. And the forced overtime. We're having a conversation next week about retraining some staff that are in administrative roles that used to work in facilities, to train them back up and create response teams where we can move in quickly, cover shifts, and not force people into mandatory overtime, because it's taking a strain. I mean, with all that said, reinvestment too. I know the senator has rejoined us, has really refocused us on a more robust community-based correctional system. And the funds that were put in FY21's budget, we haven't started spending those yet. We didn't get a final budget until October, right? And we are sorting out just the CRF funds. And so now we're starting the conversation about how are we going to use those funds. And there's a couple key areas we're looking at. And we initiated a conversation this week about 2 areas where I think we're weak and we need to do a better job. People coming into the system. So if somebody goes to court, they're sentenced to probation. They don't get a jail sentence, but it's a straight probation sentence. They come to our probation and parole offices. We do what we have to do to put them into the system and take their information and make sure they understand what their conditions of probation are, and entering them in the system, assign them to a probation and parole officer. 0 screening for them done. And so what you all end up seeing, and you all know this, you get someone who has some underlying issues, be it substance or underlying mental health issues. It takes the probation and parole officer a while to figure that out. So that's on the front end. Then you have the transition from the facilities to the communities. And what's kind of driven this home for me in the last 3 or 4 months are several unfortunate incidents where we've lost people. The latest one being the high profile death of 2 of our folks that transitioned out of the women's facility who passed away of overdoses. And when you talk, I had the opportunity to talk to their moms, to offer up our condolences. And when you hear their stories, it just gives you so much clarity about the places where we could have done better to intervene, to try to do a better job. So this transitional piece has become a focus in the last couple of weeks. And so the money that we have in the current budget, FY21, that was part of the reinvestment, we're starting to take a look at strategies to do a better job to transition people from facilities to the communities with better handoff. And one of the areas where we still need to do work is on the medical handoff. Our medical team handoff to the facilities and wrapping services around them when they get there. And so entered this week with Commissioner Squirrel, starting to talk about using some of that funding that's in our budget to enter into relationships with designated agencies where we'll embed clinicians in the probation and parole offices to try to test bed this and see if we can make some headway on better coordination when folks come out of facilities and when they come into probation and parole. So we're starting those conversations on those funds. Some of the reinvestment funds.
One of the questions
Go ahead.
regarding the overdoses.
Yes.
We've known for years that the most dangerous time for addicts is when they're just released from prison, because actually, statistically, they have been presumably off of the heroin or whatever the drug of choice was. And they get back out, and they get back into it, and they're not used to the doses they're taking. So we know that, and particularly now with fentanyl, that's even worse. One of my concerns is many of the, one of my concerns is that we have a number of programs that take people who are coming out, but they won't allow people to use medically assisted treatment. So, although that person may have been receiving medically assisted treatment within the facility. So we've got this problem, it seems, and we continue to support with public dollars this kind of incongruity, I guess is the best way to put it.
So, you know, Senator, we have requests for proposals out for new housing, transitional housing, which we expect the bids to come back. Matt, I think next month, am I correct? The bids
That's
are
right.
due next month. So part of that strategy, Senator, is to address what you're describing with more robust support for individuals in those housing environments, right? Instead of, here's a key to a room, this is your housing. We meet twice a week in a group to make sure the house rules are being followed and so on. I think with some of the high-risk folks, it's a combination of several levels of collaboration that needs to happen, be more supportive to include the housing piece, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, but I know there has been an effort in the other body to push certain programs. And I'm concerned about that effort.
Well,
If they're
they-
not taking all takers.
Oh, are they evidence-based? I mean, or is it, sometimes it's a matter of who's there to advocate for certain programs, so.
Well, I'm trying to not use the name of the programs.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, and Senator, you know, I probably could at some point have an offline conversation to better understand that. I'm being new to corrections and being here a year now and really taking a look at where I think we need to focus on. Those two areas I just talked about, if we're going to prevent people from coming back into the system. Because on the front end of this with a probation situation, you know, I think many of you that have been around corrections for a while, somebody gets in the system, they start violating probation, and it's a year and a half before somebody figures out what the underlying issues are. And then they get trapped in the system. Violation of probation, a violation of probation. Now what was a probation sentence becomes part of a jail sentence. And so that focus at that end, focus go back to what Senator Sears is talking about. Better transition back to the community. And what I've come to learn is it's more just a conversation with staff today about this. Yes, it is the housing piece, Senator. It is the ability to manage somebody that uses without that automatically sending someone back. But it's also the failure of really wrapping around people all the services that are in the community to make them successful. And so I part of that reinvestment money that's in our current budget. And to your point, Senator Kitchell, about evidence-based, part of the money also is going to start being put into better data tracking so we have a better understanding of what we're dealing with. Right now, our system is challenging. You've all heard this story over and over again. I'm asking for a price right now of what's it going to take to get the OMS system to the point where it's not so laborious to get information out of it, to be able to use data to make decisions. And so between what CSG secured for funding from BJ and what we have in that 350 for reinvestment, some of that's going to go into raising our quality of data and our ability to use data to better understand evidence-based procedures.
Well, that we do our best to make the right investments to get the outcomes everybody wants.
Right.
But historically, it's been my view that we haven't been good about collecting the data to really help determine did that investment give the results that we wanted. And once you start putting money out to a program or a service or whatever, it's very hard to redirect it if you don't have the data to challenge. So it's kind of a critical piece, because sometimes our best of intentions don't get us to where we really want to be. And so that's something that we have historically been weak. But as Sister Elizabeth told Governor Snelling, we must be doing some good because we're spending lots of money.
Well, I know that Sister was and is a legend in corrections, and I've heard it many times. I would say to you, Senator, that my approach to things as the commissioner is before we spend money, we have to make sure we're collaborating and coordinating the services that already exist. And so I will also share with you, as a result of reinvestment too, very serious conversations going on inside AHS. I know Commissioner Squirrel was in the other day, and she talked about the $400,000 that's in the governor's budget to help better coordinate behavioral health and addiction. And so those conversations are going on inside AHS, and we're starting to formulate ideas on how we can take those various pieces and look at reentry into the community and figuring out where the gaps are that we can better support people so they don't fail. And by all means, please, find places where we can make sure we don't lose people like we have.
Okay. Other questions of the commissioner?
No,
Yeah.
I would like to meet with the commissioner and Matt. Perhaps, I don't know what plans are. I'm thinking about meeting with people the Wednesday or Thursday at town meeting week in the morning and having that opportunity to meet with all the folks about their budgets.
You let us know, Senator, we'll make
I
ourselves
will.
available.
Unfortunately, we can't meet at Jensen's, Jim.
You're right.
But
hoping-
I miss
soon,
those
Senator.
conversations.
I know. I'm hoping soon we can get back to those breakfast meetings, Senator.
Yeah, those were helpful.
And I thought your wife had said that you were only signing on for it seems
April
like
1st.
you've had a little slippage here, Commissioner.
Well,
He was leaving April 1st, I believe.
Senator, the good news is I'm still married.
Well, I'm glad.
The second good piece of news is that there's not much good that came out of COVID. One of them is I left Waterbury almost a year ago and haven't been back. And I work 1.5 miles from my house. I don't know if that makes my wife happy or not, but I'm home every night now.
So
I
at
know
some
it's-
time we should thank Don Keeneland for giving up his office
Well,
space.
listen, hold on 1 minute, Senator. Come on over.
Where is he?
He just delivered a cookie and hot
Oh
chocolate.
my God.
Hey, Senator,
There's the
how are you?
landlord who's doing everything for us. Don,
Look what he
how
just
are you,
received.
my friend?
Can you see that?
I see that you're delivering cookies and coffee.
Right.
Don is actually written several books, Don Keeneland. And interesting, he was in the Marines at Camp David guarding President Eisenhower. Does that age
wow.
you, Don?
Yeah, that's right. That was a long time ago. From 1957 to 60.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So,
a lot of history there.
Don, this is the Senate Appropriations Committee, and Senate Appropriations Committee, you're looking at one of my mentors in my life. He's been in my life about 20, 25 years, and he's been a huge mentor of mine. And when this broke out, I've had a consulting office in his office for a while. And when this broke out, he allows me to run corrections from Route 7A in Arlington, Vermont. So
It's right.
Great.
It's very close to the Dairy Queen, which might be.
that's
Well, you know, it's hard to imagine, but it was March 13th, Friday the 13th was the day we left the State House. And we except for some of us one day to go back for swearing in, we've done everything remotely, and
I
it's
left
pretty,
the week before. I left the week before, Senator.
yeah.
I
So
haven't
it's
been back.
pretty amazing. Other questions
You have
or?
to find a cure for this virus and get him out of my office so I can have people come in here again.
Oh, well, I must admit, that's pretty good service when you've got coffee and cookies delivered.
Can't beat that.
He's
No.
getting hot chocolate right now. So, well, nice meeting you all. And again, thanks for your service.
Thank you, Don.
It's been very important to all of us that our state government is still running. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
And you
Thank
got
you,
a
Don.
wonderful man here, Mr. Baker.
We know that.
Any other
Enough
questions of the
wonderful
wonderful man?
He's a good
very
guy.
good to me.
Very
Been a
good.
mentor in my life for about 25 years.
I know we still hear stories about when your car was so decrepit, you had to hold it together with bungee cords, or you could only have half a tank because
Well, I
it would
stopped
leak.
in Wallingford. He was only
Wallingford,
buying
gas.
$10 worth of gas. I said, "Why are you only getting?" It's just as cheap to fill it up as it is to buy 10 gallons. He said, "If I go over 10 gallons, it leaks out." There's the colonel in the Vermont State Police.
True
Well, we
story.
took care of that. We put a fence around it
I
in
know you
did.
the JTOC transfer. So Stephanie and I fixed that wagon. So now
Right.
the cars are all in, they're in good repair.
So you
So
need to stop spoiling Colonel Birmingham.
I know, and all the good things happen after we leave.
I know.
Other question, Commissioner, do you want to just speak to the fact that with the new health contract, a lot of our nurses ended up with a new employer and no leave, and what you're trying to do on that front?
So, let me talk in general about our new healthcare provider, VitalCore. We're in our 8th month of the contract. There's been bumps in the road, and I got to say that a lot of the bumps in the road really come to COVID. In a lot of our cases where we've had positive cases inside facilities, it's touched on the medical staff and either positives or they needed to be quarantined. And so when VitalCore took over from Centurion, last July 1st, they carried over some employees, and Centurion paid them out for what leaves they had on their balances. So with VitalCore, they started at 0 balances. Now, where that became impactful is when you put someone out on leave. We deal with this different with the state employees. I've authorized, working with HR, if somebody needs to be quarantined, I don't think it's fair that we put them out as a result of their job and they have to chew up their own sick leave. So we've been covering that. The problem is, for VitalCore employees, they may not have leave. Now, Senator, you had sent me that one email. I have chatted with VitalCore in the past about this, but
I
I'll
don't
share
think I
this
saved that one.
I'll share this with you, and I don't think Viola Riggins would be upset because she's been very open about it. Viola, for the last 3 months, has been her daughter in California contracted COVID and was in very rough shape on a ventilator for a long time. So my access to Viola has been limited. And I do have to revisit this issue about what's going on with their staff. Not that there are employees, but obviously they impact our operation. And I think I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think right now there's between 7 and 10 medical staff out quarantined and or positive. And so obviously it affects our operation. It affects their morale. I don't dictate their, as part of the contract, I don't control what they do for benefits, but it impacts us. And I plan on following up the conversation with Viola, Senator.
Thank you. Other questions?
Well, I just want
Otherwise-
to mention today, Jim, S42, the Emergency Service Provider Wellness Commission passed the Senate.
I appreciate your support on that, Senator, and
Your, really your babies.
yeah, Senator Lyons and Senator White have been a big supporter as it worked the process, and I'm hoping it can move in the House fairly quickly. And I appreciate you and Senator Campion for support for sponsoring that, sir.
Okay. Well, another week almost completed, but thank you very much, Commissioner and Matt.
Any other questions for me?
I don't see it. I'm looking, but I don't see anybody. Otherwise, I think we'll let you get back to your coffee and cookies or whatever. What about you, Matt? You don't seem to have the same level of service.
Oh.
You know, I might have to find a different home office, I think. It's
But I'll finish this with a little lightness, because one of the things I have enjoyed about COVID is when I'm in meetings with employees, it's just, you see their kids and their dogs and their cats. And somebody asked Matt this morning at a meeting, he had a bunch of balloons in the background. And we asked him if it was his birthday. And one of his children, kind of on a surreptitious mission the other day, crawled down below the screen while he was on a meeting, snuck in there and put a bunch of balloons from his son's birthday floating in his office. So it's those kind of things that I think lighten us up. Let's carry on, move forward, get a laugh once in a while in these challenging times. So Senator Sears, I'll be at your call whenever you need Matt and I to meet with you.
I'll be in touch.
I would be interested in following up on that housing piece with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was NVU calling. I wonder what that's about. Okay, committee. Chrissy, was our next committee discussion?
That's correct. Committee discussion.
Okay. And Stephanie's on. We were going through what we would consider what we wanted to take up for potential inclusion in a separate kind of more expedited spending bill. But I just wanted to bring you up to date. The administration has requested an addition to the Budget Adjustment Act, which is now over at the House, that would give authority for the Department of Taxes to do a data match with Department of Labor. It would help them, I guess, as part of dealing with their strategy with the data disclosure that was of such concern. But in order for the tax department, because of the laws are so strict around how the data can be used, it needs to have a statutory authorization. So the House is going to take testimony on that request Tuesday morning, I would believe. And then in the afternoon, I believe we're all set in appropriations here just to get an update. I don't think it'll take terribly long, but just wanted to alert you that that was something that has just cropped up. The email from Suzanne Young came out last night. So that's just the latest on the BAA. And from a point of view of how to get something authorized quickly, that's the vehicle that currently is available. So just wanted to let you know that the BAA will in all likelihood come back to us with concur with further amendment. Anything else that has come up? I've been sending information on to you. One thing that we had spent some time on, and yesterday at Joint Fiscal, getting the money out for the rental assistance. And there was some question about how that those benefits that go to the landlord, how would they be treated for assistance programs? And so I sent that out because that was of concern in terms of would it be counted as income. Obviously, it's income to the landlord because it's rent and that's part of the business. But in terms of if a household were a beneficiary, and imagine one area that would really kick in is maybe food stamps where there is a housing, depending on the cost of housing, there's a way of in the calculation having some reflection of higher housing costs in calculating the benefits. So I just thought people would be interested in that. Otherwise, I think you've got everything that has come so far. So anything else, committee? Yes, Phil.
Um,
Do you want to report on your birthday? Did you have a wonderful
I did have a
celebration?
wonderful birthday. I had Chinese food and German chocolate cake.
Oh,
That was the big party. So it was obviously takeout.
oh,
But I wanted to just pass on, the program with HVAC that we funded out of the CARES money. Efficiency Vermont got back to me. They've at this point done work in 314 school buildings, which is 76% of our state school buildings. So they're 3/4 of the way through all the existing buildings, which is amazing given that we just set that program up 5 months ago or
yeah.
something like that. So I passed on a couple of questions to him about could they do more work if they had more money, and I asked him to at least think in a tentative way about whether they could do work in courthouses, county courthouses, if that turned out to be something that judiciary wanted to encourage. And so he's going to get back to me. He said they also have questions about some of the governor's proposals on weatherization. They have questions about. So what I suggested to him was if he can get back to me on my 2 questions, maybe in the coming week, we could try to schedule a little bit of time for Efficiency Vermont if it looked like they could take advantage of this kind of opportunity.
Okay, to move some money out to get some work started sooner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Senator Sears, are you about to tell us, but you're muted.
I'm muted. I can't tell you what I want to really say. We did hear back from Pat Gable, and I would like to have her in to talk about, since we're how her biggest concern in restarting is it appears that many of the county courthouses lack proper ventilation, and that may be a problem. Particularly, most of the civil trials are done there, and I'm continuing to get groups who are very concerned about the lack of trials. I mean, and they run from some of the more conservative groups to some of the most liberal groups. One group saying these people aren't being dealt with in criminal justice. Another group saying, so-and-so is being held longer than they need to be because they can't get a jury trial. And then you've got civil cases, like many of the civil cases are being held up, can't get resolved. And when insurance companies especially know that there isn't going to be a trial, there's no incentive to settle. And so people are out there lingering with damages, hospital bills, etc.
So what we have, Chrissy, if you're making a list, then is Efficiency Vermont. And Philip, do you have the person we want to have come in?
Yeah, I'll pass that to Chrissy
Okay.
right now.
And Dick, you're suggesting Pat Gable give us an update in terms of
Yeah.
the reopening of the courts.
Yeah, and Justice Eaton or one of the justices may want to join her. I think Justice Eaton is the head of the Restart Committee.
Okay.
I
All
may
right.
have the wrong justice.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, Dick, I'm wondering why why can't they hold court on a limited basis with, schedule one person an hour or every 2 hours? I mean,
They
I
can,
think,
it's jury trials.
oh, for
You
the
have to have places, they can do arraignments, and if somebody agrees to a trial by judge, they can do that. But they can't, if somebody wants a jury trial, which they obviously have a right to, both civil and criminal, they can't do it. One of the suggestions the Judiciary Committee made was that they consider allowing 6-person civil juries, so that if both the plaintiff and the defendant are agreeable to a 6-person jury, that would allow you more space. The problem is most of our courtrooms don't give you enough space to socially distance all the different people that need to be in there for a jury trial.
yeah, if you've got a jury, that's.
You got to think about your courtroom in Newport and how you get 12 jurors, a defendant, court reporter, the judge, etc.
No, it would be the jurors that you would have problems with.
Yeah, and also, where do they deliberate?
Yeah.
That's true. Okay, we'll put that, the court startup, I think, is probably,
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my disappointment with the Auditor of Accounts not doing the look at the sheriffs. And Stephanie, if you could get me a copy of the budget from last year, that the section that required the Auditor of Accounts to look at the sheriffs. I know it got watered down by the House, but
I will send you that section. I'll pull it out of Act 154.
my understanding is that, it just can't keep going on like this with him delaying it.
well, if you do some restructuring, it's how it's done, then maybe it's just a post-mortem, as opposed to trying to figure out, how to correct it for the future. If we want to go to what you're talking about, maybe a contract in north-south, and rather than multiple, every office doing it that way.
Well, it's not just, my understanding was they had a number of whistleblower complaints, and I don't think they've been investigated by the auditor, the whistleblower complaints. So, and obviously, the longer those go, the more difficult it is. I'm just disappointed.
Is the auditor's office the only resource to do that kind of review?
I believe because they're independently elected, and I believe the auditors, I'd have to check with council, but I believe the Auditor of Accounts is required to do audits of the sheriffs.
I know they do. I know they do that.
Basis.
Yeah. Okay. So Stephanie, you were online, I guess, to we're going to have further discussion. Are there any things that we had dangling from yesterday? We were so fatigued by the end. We didn't know OPEB from ADEC to ARC to whatever.
We were pierced.
I think so.
So not Chris and I are going to work on a sheet that helps with, a simpler and multi-option layout of just focused on OPEB, and hopefully that will be helpful next week. But in terms of the idea of a faster moving interim piece of legislation, do you want next week some time to have, I know A&R is scheduled for regular budget testimony, but within those two budgets, especially Forest and Parks are two one-time investments, the outdoor recreation and the Forest and
I thought we would have them speak to that and see.
Yeah. And I know that Natural Resource Committee is working on the weatherization pieces. The other outstanding piece is in the broadband world. There is existing CRF allocation that requires additional legislate, like what we just put into budget adjustment,
right,
for them to spend more. And I don't know where Senate Finance is on making recommendations regarding that, if it would be Senate Finance, most likely. And then there's also the pieces for broadband that the governor put in his one-time list, and whether there's a benefit to having a portion or all of that move quicker.
I don't know. I don't know because there's been a lot of discussion around, at least in finance, if the state is using public dollars, then what would be the policy parameters that should go with that funding? And certainly what we were limited to by CRF wasn't viewed as desirable, or perhaps in the long term where the investments people would have preferred to make. So I guess I'll have to have a conversation with the chair. Broadband just falls into a number of committees in terms of the importance. It's not regulated, but I guess it falls into finance primarily at this point. In the House, of course, they've got their own technology committee. I might, as a member of Joint Information Technology Oversight, send a memo out, because we did rescue and from being reverted the remaining money that we had allocated in CRF for broadband. We did that in budget adjustment. We used a portion of it to extend the subsidy. for internet service, but there's about 3.2 million. Is that about
Yes.
right, Stephanie?
That's about the right amount.
That is available, but it has to be released subject to the approval of the General Assembly. So it lends itself to the smaller bill, but in terms of how would there want to be any modifications in terms of how that remaining money, which has not been obligated, should be directed? And that's something I guess I'll talk to Senate Finance, but I'm also thinking maybe I should send a memo to the members of the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee, because there was concern about not having the money reverted at our last meeting, and see if their thoughts about if releasing it, how it might be directed, depending on whether needs have changed or with additional information. So that's one I definitely think we should look at for possible inclusion. Anything else?
So that do you want us to, Chrissy and I, to sort of start that memo a little bit and send it to you?
Oh, that would be really helpful.
Okay, we'll do that.
I know that, of course, we could take the easier way out, and if the House wants to originate this bill, which is what the chair asked, if that would be fine. They've got a technology committee that's got a lot more time than our finance committee does to really look at this. So we may have the benefit of their work if they're going to do the bill first as well. But I think we should still give our colleagues the opportunity to weigh in.
Okay.
Other thoughts about just to follow up on what we were, potential areas that we wanted to get people in to help us determine what should be released earlier. Do we have Gus on? Gus Seelig? Chrissy? Okay, because there was some discussion about on the housing front, should we release any of that proposed general fund that was in the governor's budget? He had 20 million out of the one-time money to allocate to housing. Don't think we were going to necessarily put it all out the door, but I was thinking we should hear from him if we can do a couple of projects, get them going, might be a good idea.
Yeah, real good. I mean, you don't start building in August, If we can get that out early, they could get going as soon as the weather breaks.
Yeah, that's the whole thinking, is some of these you can really get the advantage of the spring and startup of construction.
Good idea.
Okay. And then, anything else? We're gonna, of course, have Stephanie and Chris come back on pensions and help us kind of sort out what, if anything, and how we do it on the teachers' OPEB.
And then will Senate Economic Development be sending us their recommendations on the grant piece?
Yeah, on the business grants.
Yeah.
I don't have a good sense of that, and I'm going to ask Senator Ballin if she can help sort that out, because we did not include it in the budget adjustment, either the House or the Senate, and that would be the 10 million that the governors recommend and go out to business grants for those businesses who they have now identified as in greatest need. I don't know the extent to which the committee has taken testimony, what businesses have been defined, what would be the criteria, how would we make sure that the money's directed to the right businesses. And I'm hoping that we would have more, we're getting a little bit more CRF because of the FEMA 100% match, so that we could use CRF dollars for the business grants. But a need to have, to release that money, need to have recommendations around what would be the policy parameters. And of course, I think House Commerce has been working on that as well. So I'm not sure how much discussion has gone on in terms of, are they thinking along similar lines or quite different or independent and haven't, no one knows at this point. So can you tell us, Becca, on the work?
In all honesty, so much of our committee work in the last week and a half has been around 1099 and issues around unemployment. And so this is definitely something that the chair and vice chair have talked to me about. And we're still trying to carve out that time to do a deeper dive with ACCD. We've been really clear with them that we want clearer parameters about which industries should be targeted, where is the need. It has to be very carefully thought out, but I don't think the chair is at a place right now to make specific recommendations. But it's actually on my list of things to do this weekend, talk with Senator Sorokin about that specifically. So
okay, well, it's not that it has to be done within 48 hours, but if you want to move the money out quickly, then and frankly, I think in the end at joint fiscal, we were able to come to some agreement and parameters around the release of that 200 million. So that's one thing off the plate for now until the federal government, until the Congress passes another bill. So other things that we haven't thought of that we need to add? Maybe other things will emerge or talking. Natural resources, Rich, you're going to be giving us something on weatherization?
We're working on it. And they're trying to understand. And Chris had a draft of stuff that we began to work from today.
All right. So I guess
I will encourage Chris to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I think really what we're trying to do is get the best thinking about. Don't worry about the whole thing in entirety, but what would make sense at least to move out as a first increment or whatever. So
right, and we had testimony today from people in the construction business, because part of this is the training of people to do the work, and there apparently is nowhere near enough people out there to do the work. So that's part of what they're trying to sort through.
Okay, so maybe accelerating
that's
isn't going to amount to anything because there isn't enough capacity out there to take on more work or whatever.
Yes, That's the, so we're working on it.
All right, okay. So it's about 2:30 on a Friday afternoon. I think, unless there's anything else, I'm going to adjourn the committee